The air was dry, full of dust and heat. As the alien auction began under the red twin suns of the planet Drexa, the arena was noisy with shouting bidders, strange smells, and the scent of old metal. Creatures from many worlds filled the stands. Eyes glowing, claws tapping, some laughed, some growled, and some waited in silence for their prize. On the center stage, cages stood in a row, each holding someone broken. Some were tall with scales, others had soft fur, but all shared one thing: emptiness in their eyes. The auctioneer, a thick-bodied alien with glowing skin, waved his claw and shouted into the crowd. Next up, a personal slave, silent, trained, and pretty enough for private use. The cage door opened, and a girl stepped out slowly. Her skin was light blue with faint glowing lines that pulsed weakly. Her hair was long, tangled, and pale like moonlight. She looked thin, like she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Her eyes did not rise to meet the crowd. They stared at the ground. Empty and lifeless. She's been used. The auctioneer smirked. But still good for one-on-one tasks. Some in the crowd laughed. Others shook their heads. A few made low offers just for fun, but most turned away. She was too thin, too quiet, too broken, not even worth owning. At the edge of the crowd, a human man stood, silent, watching. His clothes were plain, dusty from travel. His boots were worn. His name was Daniel. And he had come to this planet for spare parts. Not people, but something about the girl made him stop. It wasn't her beauty, though she had that. It wasn't her glowing skin or alien form. It was her silence, the way she didn't cry or beg. Just stood there like a forgotten statue. 100 credits. Shouted a bulky alien from the back. Daniel didn't blink. He stepped forward and raised a finger. 200. The crowd turned in surprise. A human bidding on her. They began to murmur. Some laughed again, louder now. The bulky alien frowned. She's not worth that much. Human, Daniel said nothing. The auctioneer grinned. Going once, going twice sold to the human traveler. The girl didn't react, not even as the chain was unlocked from her cage. She walked behind Daniel without a word. Her steps were slow, her eyes still low. The guards handed Daniel a control chip. She obeys voice commands, but don't expect conversation, they snickered. Daniel took the chip, but didn't use it. He looked at her. Can you walk to my ship? She nodded slightly. Her legs moved, but her soul did not. On the way back to his small transport ship, he tried speaking to her. Do you have a name? No answer. Are you hungry? No reply. Just a faint shake of her head when they reached the ship. He let her go in first. She stopped at the door, unsure. Daniel pressed the button to open it. You're free to walk in. Inside, it was clean, small, but calm. The ship smelled of oil and warm metal. The lights weren't bright. The air was cool. There was no shouting, no weapons, no cages. He pointed to a small seat in the corner. You can rest there. She sat stiffly, like she expected to be punished for touching something. Daniel went to the kitchen, returned with a cup of clean water and soft bread. He placed it near her, but didn't force her to take it. Then he sat across the room, pretending to check the controls. She waited 5 minutes before reaching for the cup. Her fingers trembled as she drank. Then slowly, she took the bread and ate it. One small bite at a time. Daniel watched from the corner of his eye, careful not to scare her. He saw her glance at him once, quick and full of fear. He didn't speak again, just let her eat in peace. Later that night, he showed her the small guest room. You can sleep here. The door locks from inside. She stepped in, looked around like it was a trick. She stood at the corner of the bed for several minutes before lying down. Fully clothed, eyes open to the ceiling, Daniel stood outside for a moment, then whispered to himself, no one should have to live like this. He didn't know her story, not yet, but in that auction, He had seen something the others missed. She wasn't just a slave. She was someone who had once been whole, someone who had been broken by cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, someone who could heal again. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. The girl sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled up to her chest. Her arms wrapped around her legs like a shield. Her wide, glowing eyes kept watching the door, waiting for it to swing open, waiting for pain. She had been given food, water, and a clean bed, but she couldn't relax. Her body remembered too much. Her heart couldn't believe it. Kindness was always a trick, always leading to something worse. No chains, no commands, no cold voices. Still, her body stayed tense. Every sound made her flinch. Every silence made her nervous. It was too quiet, too calm. Daniel sat alone in the control room. He didn't check on her, didn't follow her. He wanted her to feel safe. He knew trust wasn't given, it was earned. And sometimes it never came at all. She stayed in that position for hours, not sleeping, not moving. Only when her eyes burned from staying open too long did she finally lie down, but even then, she didn't close her eyes all the way. She had learned not to, in all the places she had been kept. In the middle of the night, the ship hit a small patch of turbulence. Just a slight shake, but she bolted upright, heart racing, breathing fast. Her hands covered her mouth, trying to silence the panic. The door remained closed. No footsteps. No shouting. Nothing happened. Slowly, she curled back under the blanket. But her eyes remained open until morning. When light from the hallway reached under her door, she got up carefully. She expected someone to be waiting. Maybe holding a weapon, maybe with orders. Instead, she found a folded outfit hanging outside. Her room simple and clean. A note was placed on top. "You don't have to wear this, but if you want to change, it's yours, Daniel." She stared at the note for a long time. The handwriting was neat. Human, soft, no threats, no demands, no collar attached to the clothes. She took them in and changed quietly. Her old rags smelled of sweat and fear. The new clothes were plain but soft and warm against her skin. She walked toward the main room with slow steps, her eyes scanning every corner. She didn't know what Daniel might ask of her now. He had given her food, a room, and clothes. Surely he would ask for payment. And she had been trained to obey. Daniel was cooking something at the small kitchen corner of the ship. He looked up and smiled gently when he saw her. "Good morning," he said simply. She lowered her head. Unsure what to say, her body stiffened. He noticed her nervous posture, but didn't move closer. "There's food here if you're hungry. I made something easy to eat." She nodded slowly, stepped forward like she was entering a trap. She sat at the table, waiting for his command, but none came. Daniel placed a warm bowl of porridge and fruit in front of her. He sat down across the table with his own bowl and started eating quietly. She waited, staring at the food her stomach wanted. But her mind warned her, what if it was drugged? What if this was a test? He noticed her hesitation. "It's safe," he said. "But you don't have to eat it if you don't trust me yet." His voice was calm, not angry, not disappointed. That confused her more than anything. She had expected shouting, maybe punishment. Instead, he gave her time after a few moments. She lifted the spoon and tasted the porridge. It was warm, a little sweet, not poisoned, not strange, just food. Her hands shook as she ate, but she didn't stop. Daniel didn't stare at her while she ate. He just looked at the stars outside the window. "What should I call you?" he asked softly. "Do you have a name?" She paused. Her voice had not been used in a long time. When she finally spoke, it came out in a whisper. "They called me 317. Daniel frowned. "That's not a name. That's a number." She looked down. "I forgot my real one." He nodded slowly. Then maybe you can choose a new one someday, one that belongs only to you. Her heart jumped at the idea. A name that she chose. It felt too good, too strange, but also possible. After breakfast, Daniel began working on the ship's wiring. He didn't ask her to help, but she watched him from a distance. Curious, she didn't understand much. But the way he worked calmly, the way he didn't shout at tools or throw things, it felt peaceful. When he dropped a small wrench, she rushed over and picked it up for him without thinking. He smiled. Thanks. She blinked, waiting for more, maybe an order or task. But he just returned to his work. That night, she returned to her room and sat on the bed. Her fingers touched the soft blanket. She whispered to herself, he didn't touch me, not even once. Tears filled her glowing eyes. Her mind couldn't understand it yet, but her heart felt something new. Hope. She stood in the hallway, silent and still. Her bare feet touched the cold floor of the ship. Her fingers gently brushed the doorframe of the small bathroom. It was the cleanest place she had seen in years, yet she stared at it like it was a trap. Daniel's voice still echoed in her head from earlier that morning. If you ever want to use the shower, it's yours. The door locks from the inside. Take your time. She didn't move right away. Instead, she stood there for a long time, staring at the soft towel folded on the side. The clean clothes sat neatly beside it. They looked untouched, like they belonged to someone else. Someone valuable, she took a shaky breath and stepped inside. The door slid shut behind her with a quiet hiss. She pressed the lock, her hand trembling, waiting for it to reopen, expecting someone to barge in. But no one came. She turned the water knob slowly, unsure how it worked. A light steam filled the room, and warm water began to fall. The gentle sound hit her ears like soft music. She hadn't heard that sound since before she was taken. Her hands reached out slowly, letting the water hit her fingertips first. It was warm, soft, comforting. She let out a sharp breath as the warmth crawled up her arm. She stepped fully under the stream. Her breath caught in her chest. Then the memories hit her. She saw Flash's hands grabbing her. Collars tightened around her neck. Cold rooms, sharp commands. Her voice screaming without sound. She had forgotten what comfort felt like. And now, in this warm space, it all came crashing back. Tears mixed with water as they rolled down her face. But these tears were different. They weren't from pain or fear. These were tears of release, of something buried deep coming to the surface. She sat on the floor of the shower, arms wrapped around herself, letting the water pour over her. She didn't know how long she stayed there, but for the first time, she let herself cry without holding back. Outside, Daniel waited in the kitchen. He didn't go near the door. He didn't rush her. He just waited quietly, drinking tea, letting her take all the time she needed. He understood more than he said. He knew healing wasn't loud. It was silent, slow, and deeply painful. The fact that she had chosen to step into the shower meant something huge. It meant she had taken the first step toward feeling like a person again. Back in the bathroom, the girl finally stood up. Her body felt weak, but lighter somehow. She picked up the towel and dried herself gently, careful not to touch the bruises that had faded but never really left her skin. She put on the new clothes. They were soft, clean, and simple. No chains, no symbols, no branding, just clothes like a normal person would wear. She opened the door slowly, peeking into the hallway, expecting to be scolded for taking too long. But again, no one came. She walked into the main room and found Daniel reading a book by the window. He looked up and gave her a soft smile. "Feel better?" She hesitated, then nodded, wiping her face quickly so he wouldn't see the tears still clinging to her lashes. He didn't comment on her red eyes or wet hair. He didn't ask what she had. Remembered. He just nodded and patted the seat beside him. "Hungry?" She nodded again, and he brought her a warm bowl of soup. The smell made her stomach tighten, not with fear, but with hunger. She ate quietly, spoon by spoon. While he sat across from her and waited, halfway through the meal, she stopped, looked up at him, and said in a very soft voice, "Why? Are you nice to me?" Daniel looked at her gently, his voice calm as always, "Because someone should have been, long before me." Her lips parted slightly. Surprised by the answer, no one had ever said that before, not even once. She whispered again, "You don't want anything from me?" He shook his head. "No, I don't." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes full of confusion and something else, something almost like light. It was faint, but it was there. When she finished eating, she placed the bowl down and stood slowly, her voice still shaking. "Thank you." For the water, Daniel nodded, not making a big deal of it any time that night. She returned to her room and closed the door. She didn't lock it this time, instead of lying stiffly on the bed. She sat against the wall, hugging the soft pillow close. She remembered the warmth of the water, the silence, the clean towel, and the way Daniel looked at her not like property, but like a real person. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she whispered her old name to herself, testing it softly, like a forgotten song. "Lyra." Her voice cracked, but she smiled through the tears. "My name is Lyra *." She stared at the spoon in her hand like it was a weapon, not a tool. Her grip was too tight, her fingers pale from pressing so hard. The bowl in front of her was filled with hot stew, soft vegetables floating in a gentle broth. The smell was good, but it made her nervous. She had been fed before, but never like this. Never with kindness, never with a seat at a table and no eyes watching her hungrily. Lyra had always eaten on the floor, cold concrete under her knees. Her hands had once been tied behind her back as she was forced to eat from a dirty plate. She remembered the voices laughing at her, throwing scraps, hitting her when she chewed, too slow or too fast. Now, everything was different, but that didn't mean her mind believed it yet. Daniel sat across from her, his posture calm, relaxed. He didn't speak, didn't rush her. He simply stirred his own bowl of stew and took small bites. Like this was the most normal thing in the world. She watched him closely, copying his movements. She lifted the spoon slowly, brought it to her lips, and paused. "Is it poisoned?" she asked, voice dry and low. Daniel looked up, surprised not by the question, but by the fact she had asked it out loud. "No," he said softly. "I cooked it myself. I wouldn't harm you." She stared into his eyes, trying to see if he was lying, but there was only stillness there, and something else, sadness, but not pity. She lowered her eyes and finally took a bite. The stew was warm, soft, and full of flavor. Her stomach growled in surprise, and she almost dropped the spoon. The taste brought sudden tears to her eyes, and she hated that. She hated how food, a simple bite, could make her cry like that. She looked away and kept eating, this time faster, trying to stop the emotion. Her hands shook with each spoonful. And soon she was eating as if someone might rip the bowl away from her. Daniel gently raised a hand. "It's okay. Slow down. There's more if you want it." Lyra froze, the spoon halfway to her mouth. She blinked, confused. "More?" "Yes," he said. "You don't have to eat like it's your last meal. I won't take it from you." Her hand lowered slowly, the spoon returning to the bowl. She sat back, her breathing heavy. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to eat like this." Daniel offered a small smile. "You don't need to apologize. You're safe now. No one's watching. No one's punishing you." Lyra nodded slowly, though her body didn't believe it yet. Her muscles stayed tense, ready to run or curl up at the first sign of shouting. Daniel stood and poured her a cup of warm water with lemon. placing it beside her when I first started cooking for myself. I burned everything, he said with a soft chuckle. I lived on protein bars for months. This stew is a victory for me. She tilted her head, curious. You cooked for yourself. He nodded. For a long time, I didn't have anyone either. Her gaze dropped to the table. Were you? Alone too? For a while, he said, not in chains like you, but still. Alone, the words rested between them like fragile glass. Lyra placed the spoon down and wiped her lips with her sleeve. Forgetting there was a napkin on the table, Daniel noticed but said nothing. She wasn't ready for napkins yet. He got up and brought out a small plate with something else bread, warm and freshly made. He broke it in half and handed a piece to her. Try this. She took it slowly, unsure again. She bit into it carefully, and her eyes widened at the soft texture and gentle taste. This is real, she whispered. Daniel smiled. It's the only thing I know how to bake. Lyra looked at him, her voice shaky but steady. Why are you doing this? Feeding me? Giving me clean clothes? Letting me sleep in a bed? What do you want from me? Daniel didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of the table. Nothing. I don't want anything. She didn't believe it, not fully. Her whole life had been full of people who only gave something if they could take something worse in return. She had been traded, beaten, starved, and used. The idea of kindness without cost felt impossible. You'll ask for something later. She whispered, They always do. Daniel shook his head. No, Lyra, I won't. You're not a tool or a toy or a trade. You're a person. That's all you ever needed to be. She stared at him, the words strange and heavy in her chest, like they were trying to unlock a part of her that had long been sealed shut. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table, and she nodded once, unsure how to reply. Later that night, she returned to her room, not hungry anymore, not shaking. She sat on the bed and thought about the way he had looked at her, not with desire, not with control, but with simple, quiet respect. She whispered her name again, Lyra, just to remind herself it was real. And then she said something she hadn't said in years, good night. The ship floated silently through space, stars drifting past like distant candles in the dark. Inside the walls of metal and light, warmth had started to grow, not from machines or fuel, but from something softer, something human. Lyra lay in her bed, wrapped in a soft blanket Daniel had given her days ago. She had eaten 3 full meals now, taken more showers, even sat at the table without trembling, but sleep still didn't come easily. That night, the dreams returned. Screams echoed in her mind. Hands pulling her through dark hallways, collars snapping around her neck. Words whispered in her ear like poison. She saw the faces of her old captors, heard their laughter, remembered the pain. Remembered how she was just a thing to them. Never a person. Her eyes flew open, her breath short, her body was drenched in sweat. The room spun, and her hands clutched the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her alive. She tried to stay quiet, tried to breathe through it, but her chest burned, and her throat refused to stay silent. A sharp cry escaped before she could stop it. Daniel heard her from the next room. He was reading quietly when the sound reached him. At first, he froze, unsure if he should go to her or give her space. Then he heard it again, louder this time, like the cry of a wounded child. He stood up, walked quickly to her door, and knocked softly. Lyra. No answer, just silence on, then a broken sob, muffled under something. He didn't wait. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, he saw her curled in the corner of the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face was buried in the blanket, her body shaking violently. He stepped in slowly, not saying anything right away. She didn't even seem to notice he was there. Lost in the storm inside her head, Daniel knelt by the bed, keeping some distance. It's okay, Lyra? You're safe. She flinched at his voice, her eyes wide and wild. Her breathing was sharp, desperate. She tried to push herself into the corner, like she wanted to vanish into the wall. I'm not going to touch you, Daniel said softly, but I'll stay, if that's okay. Her lips trembled. She couldn't find the words, but she didn't tell him to leave. That was enough for him to stay. He sat on the floor beside the bed, back leaning against the wall. He didn't look at her, didn't ask questions. He just let the silence settle around them like a blanket of its own. Minutes passed, maybe longer, and slowly. Her breathing calmed. Her body stopped shaking as much. Her fingers loosened their grip on the blanket. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she moved toward him very slowly, like a scared animal testing the space. She crawled across the bed, then down to the floor. Her hand touched his sleeve light as air. Can I? She whispered, eyes not meeting his. Daniel looked at her gently. You don't have to ask. Sit here if it helps. She sat beside him, back against the same wall, close enough to feel his warmth. Her eyes stared forward, but her voice was far away. They used to come at night, when the others were asleep. That's when it was worse. Daniel didn't speak. He just listened, letting her voice carry what she had carried alone for too long. They told me I was nothing, she continued. That I was made to serve. That if I stopped being useful, they'd throw me out like trash. Her voice cracked. I believed them. Daniel turned his head slightly toward her. They were wrong. Her lip trembled again. But she didn't pull away. Then why did no one stop them? His voice was heavy with sadness. I don't know, but I can promise you none of it was your fault. Silence returned for a while, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with slow breathing, soft pain, and something else trust. Then she leaned against him, just barely. Her head resting gently on his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't even breathe too loud. Afraid she'd retreat again, she whispered. You don't smell like them. He smiled a little, not sure what to say. That's probably a good thing. She laughed just once, soft and tired. But it was a laugh, the first he had ever heard from her. I don't want to be afraid forever. She said quietly, You won't be. He replied, Fear fades when it's no longer fed. She looked up at him, and for the first time, her eyes didn't look like empty glass. They looked alive, tired, but real. I don't know what this is, she whispered, but thank you. Daniel nodded. You're welcome, Lyra. That night, they stayed like that, two broken souls sitting on the floor of a quiet ship in the middle of endless space. But something had changed. Not everything was healed. Not everything was okay. But for the first time, Lyra had cried into someone's arms, and he hadn't let go. The stars outside looked peaceful. Endless rivers of light stretching across the black sky. But peace is often an illusion, and for Lyra, it shattered without warning. She was helping Daniel organize spare parts in the ship's lower cargo bay. Her hands were steadier now, her steps lighter. She had even started humming to herself quietly, barely above a whisper, but still, it was music. Daniel smiled every time he heard it. He didn't interrupt, didn't point it out. He just let it exist, like a flower blooming in a place where nothing was supposed to grow. Then the alarm went off. A red light flashed across the walls, followed by a sharp warning beep. Lyra froze, the color draining from her face. Her hands dropped the tool she was holding, and she backed up quickly, heart racing. Daniel ran to the console, fingers flying over the controls. It's a small ship, no ID signal, coming fast, too fast. Lyra's voice cracked. Is it? Them. He looked at her, and his silence answered for him. Her legs gave out, and she dropped to the floor, hands over her mouth, shaking. No, no, no. They found me. Daniel grabbed his gear bag, pulled out a blaster, checked the charge, and looked at her again. Lyra, I need you to go to the safe room. Do you remember where it is?" She nodded, barely breathing. But, he said firmly. "They're not taking you again, not while I'm breathing." The ship rocked as something bumped into the hull. The docking clamp alarm rang. They were boarding. Daniel closed the cargo door and locked it, then knelt beside her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid. Just stay hidden. I'll come for you." Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice small and desperate. "They won't stop. You don't understand. They think they own me." His eyes were fierce, calm, but burning with something deeper. "Then let them learn they're wrong." He turned and ran toward the upper level, leaving her in the hallway. She stared after him, heart pounding. Then she stood up and ran to the hidden panel behind the storage crate. She slid inside the tight compartment, curled up, and held her breath. Footsteps echoed across the ship, heavy boots. Shouting in a rough alien tongue, she recognized the voice. It was one of the guards from her old prison. The one who laughed every time someone begged. He was here. Now, on Daniel's ship, blaster fire rang out. Loud and sharp, she covered her ears. Her body remembered the pain before it even touched her. She rocked back and forth, whispering to herself, "He'll be okay. He'll come back," he promised. Meanwhile, Daniel moved like a ghost through the ship. Using every corner, every shadow, his blaster fired clean. Now 3 shots, then silence, 1 down, 2 more to go. He dodged behind a support beam as a plasma shot zipped past his head. His shoulder hit the wall hard, but he kept moving, breathing steady. He wasn't fighting for survival, he was fighting for her. One of the aliens shouted, "Return the girl, and we'll let you live." Daniel shouted back, "She's not yours." Another blast echoed, and he took out the second attacker, but the third was waiting in the cockpit, where Daniel had left the control codes vulnerable. By the time he reached the cockpit door, the alien was already trying to hack into the system. Daniel didn't wait. He stormed through the door and fired 1 clean shot into the alien's arm. Making him drop the device, the attacker lunged at him, claws slashing through the air. Daniel blocked the hit and shoved the alien into the panel, sparks flying from the impact. The two struggled for several seconds before Daniel finally slammed the blaster into the alien's head. Knocking him out cold, he stood there, breathing heavily, blood running from a scratch across his cheek. He wiped it away and ran back toward the hidden compartment. He opened the panel and found Lyra still curled up, eyes wide but unharmed. "You're okay," he said softly, kneeling beside her. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Her whole body shook, but this time it wasn't from fear, was from release, from knowing someone had fought for her. "Really fought? I thought they'd take me again," she cried. "I thought I'd lose everything." Again, Daniel held her tightly. "You're not going anywhere. Not without me. Not ever again, for a long time." They stayed like that, her face buried against his neck, his arms wrapped around her like a promise made real. Later, as they cleaned the ship and secured the unconscious attackers, Lyra asked quietly, "Why would you risk your life for me?" Daniel looked at her with tired, honest eyes. "Because you're worth it." Her lips trembled, her voice a whisper. No one ever said that before. "Well," Daniel said gently, "someone should have." The stars outside were quiet again. The chaos had passed. The air inside the ship felt softer, as if even the walls knew something had changed. Lyra stood by the small window in her room, dressed in the soft white robe Daniel had given her after patching up the last of her bruises. Her glowing skin was no longer pale with fear. Her eyes, once dim and hollow, now held light faint, but steady. Days had passed since the attack. The 3 intruders had been turned over to the nearest patrol, and Daniel's ship was cleared to travel again, but they didn't leave right away. Daniel gave her time to rest, to breathe, to choose. She had chosen silence for a while. But not because she was afraid. She was thinking that morning. She moved quietly into the main cabin where Daniel sat fixing the food processor. He looked up and smiled. "Morning?" She nodded. "Good morning." Her voice was calm now. No longer trembling, he offered her a seat and a cup of warm tea. "Sleep okay?" "I did," she said, taking the cup. "I even dreamed, but it wasn't bad this time." "That's good," Daniel replied, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Dreams can be healing if we let them." She sipped the tea slowly, watching him over the rim of the cup. Then, softly, she spoke. "You saved me." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I just did what anyone decent would do." Lyra shook her head. "No, they wouldn't have. I was trash to them, a used object. But you saw me, you fought for me, and not once did you ask for anything." Daniel stayed silent. Letting her speak, she placed the cup on the table, her hands folded tightly together. "Do you know what it means for someone like me to be free?" She asked. "To not be owned, to not be feared or touched without consent." "I can imagine," Daniel said softly, "but I'll never know it like you do." She looked down, then back up, her voice trembling and still. "You made me feel safe. You taught me how to sleep, how to eat, how to speak again. You gave me my name back, my voice back. I only reminded you who you were." Daniel said gently, "You did the rest." Lyra stood slowly, walked toward the side of the room where he sat. She knelt beside him, not in shame, not in obedience, but in something else. Her hands were steady as she reached for his. "I don't want to belong to anyone again," she said. "Not as a slave, not as an object, not even as a burden." Daniel's brows furrowed slightly, confused by the sudden shift in her tone. "You don't," he said. "You're your own person now," she nodded. "I know. But I want to belong to someone differently, by choice, not as a possession, but as a partner. I want to belong to you, not because you own me, but because I love you." Daniel blinked. Stunned, the room fell quiet. Lyra took a deep breath, her hands tightening around his. "Daniel, will you let me be your wife?" He stared at her, searching her eyes. He had never expected this, never even dreamed it. To him, her healing was the only goal, not reward, not love, not marriage. He swallowed hard, then cupped her cheek gently. "Lyra, are you sure? This isn't something you owe me. You don't have to." "I know," she whispered, leaning into his hand. "That's what makes this real. You're the first person I've ever chosen for myself." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes, but he blinked them away, smiling gently. "Then yes, Lyra, I would be honored to be your husband." A soft smile spread across her face, peaceful and bright. She rested her forehead against his, both of them breathing the same air, hearts beating in sync. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding the moment. Later that day, they stood on the observation deck of the ship, stars swirling around them. Lyra wore a new robe, white and simple. Daniel wore his cleanest jacket. Their wedding wasn't fancy. There were no guests, no music, no lights. But the stars were watching. Daniel held her hands. "From now on, no matter what galaxy we're in, no matter what happens, I'll always stand by you. And I will choose you every day," Lyra said. "Even when I'm afraid, even when I remember the past, I will still choose you." They kissed, gently, softly, not rushed. It was not the kiss of a hero and a rescued slave. It was the kiss of two souls who had found freedom together. And as the ship continued its quiet journey across space, Lyra knew something deep in her heart. She had been sold, used, and discarded. But in the end, she was not saved by power. She was saved by kindness, and now she was not a slave. She was a wife, she was loved. And for the first time in her life, she was truly home.